Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Basics of Freelancing Workshop Part 1. There will be a Part 2 next week as well. So happy you could join us today. I'm Alicia Alex, and I'm the Associate Director in Career and Professional Development at Art Center. I wanted to give you a little bit of background information on my professional history before we jump in. So prior to working at Art Center, I was an artist and partnerships manager at a design studio called Bando. I worked with over 50 freelance artists and designers a year and oversaw a ton of collaborations. I also have a fine art and business degree background, and so freelancing is something I always wish I had learned in school, and it's something that I always wish the freelancers that I worked with had learned in school. So I'm really excited to take you through this workshop today and share some of my best practices and tips with you. A couple quick housekeeping notes. So this workshop will be recorded and the recording will be available afterwards. There's a lot of info to cover today. There's obviously a lot of topics related to freelancing. And so feel free to ask questions along the way, drop those in the Q&A. I'll leave some time at the end and we can talk through those and I can dive in a little bit deeper to anything we covered. I also just want to note that while I have a lot of experience working on the client side of freelancing, I'm in no way a tax professional or a lawyer. And so I highly recommend reaching out to a professional with any questions related to either contracts or taxes or anything like that. But we will give a quick overview of some of those topics today. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk through a general intro to freelancing, and then I'm going to talk through some business basics. After that, we'll go through how to build your brand, and then we'll talk through how to grow your community. Today's topics are really to set kind of this groundwork to make sure that you are set up to succeed in freelancing before you even begin. These are sort of the things that I've always seen as really important to just have a general understanding of before you even dive into working with clients. And as a reminder, this is just a general overview of freelancing. We'll have more workshops in the future that dive into the nitty-gritty of all of these topics, and I'm happy to answer specific questions about any of this at the end. All right, so intro to freelancing. We're going to talk about different types of freelancers, different terms you might come across, some pros and cons of freelancing, and just a couple things you might need to know before you get started. So there are a couple different types of freelancers. I think maybe the most common term and something you might be familiar with is this idea of an independent contractor. Most freelancers fall under this title of independent contractor. It just means someone that is working on a per project basis, does not work in-house, is not an employee anywhere. And this is kind of the most common term for a freelancer. You might have also heard the phrase moonlighter. This is essentially someone who works full-time as an employee, but then also freelances on the side or has what you might think of as a side hustle. And then there's the term diversified worker, which is kind of a newer term in our gig economy. And this just means someone that has multiple sources of income. So maybe you work part-time as an employee at a bookstore. You are also freelancing on the side. Maybe you rent out a room to Airbnb, and then you also drive Lyft. That means that you are a diversified worker. These are all areas where you would be freelancing. And then a temporary worker, which also could be referred to as a temp, is someone that is contracted for a set amount of time. So maybe you are working in-house somewhere, but you're not an employee, you are a temp and you are there for 6 months working on a project. That's a common term as well. And then freelance business owner is essentially a beefed up version of the independent contractor. And that's really just someone who has been so successful at freelancing that they want to grow it into a larger business where they're maybe employing other freelancers to take on clients or tasks. So this would be a freelance business owner, and you get categorized a little bit differently, but we'll talk about that in the business section. So let's dive into the fun part, some of the benefits of freelancing. There are a lot of reasons that people love to freelance, and we'll talk through some of the most common reasons that people freelance. So flexible schedule. Obviously, as a freelancer, you get to make your own schedule. You're working at your own pace. You take on new tasks as you want to. And this open arrangement kind of gives you more time to do the things you love. You have more control over your schedule. You also get fewer working hours in general. So because you're dictating your own workload, you're dictating your own schedule. On average, freelancers work 36 hours a week versus 40 hours a week. If you are a super productive person and you could work 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day, your work week could be a lot smaller than someone who is working full-time as an employee. And then, of course, workplace flexibility. As a freelancer, you can technically work anywhere you want in the world. You can work by the pool, you can work in your backyard, you can work from a different country. There really is that nice workplace flexibility. And then also the time of day you want to work can be pretty flexible. And then one of the things that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot, but as a freelancer, you actually get a lot of tax deductions. So when you're freelancing, you can deduct everything from your rent, because that is technically your office space. You can actually deduct your education sometimes, because if you are going to school for something related to your freelancing career, that can be deducted, all of your supplies. And so you actually can end up saving quite a bit on taxes, depending how savvy you are with deduction. So that's another added benefit that people see. Now let's talk about the challenges of freelancing. And I say challenges because challenges can be overcome. And so not necessarily the cons of freelancing, but some of the common challenges people will face. And so one of them, maybe the biggest one, is job security and income are not guaranteed. So as a freelancer, you are fully responsible for your income and your consistency of income. So it is up to you to find clients, to get new clients, to find projects. When you work full-time somewhere, you know that you're getting paid every other week or every week. You know what salary you're going to make the entire year, and it makes it easy for you to look ahead and be able to plan in that way. That is not the case with freelancing. You have to be a little bit more flexible and do some of that planning ahead of time to account for unforeseen challenges or drops in the economy or canceled projects. And so these are things that we'll talk about in a minute just as well. And then again, not every hour is billable. So when you are a full-time employee, you're paid for every hour that you're at work. The same is not true for freelancers. So oftentimes the billable hours are the ones where you're actually working on client projects and you know that you are going to be paid for that time. But there is a lot of time spent managing clients, finding new clients, doing billing, taxes. Those are things where you're spending time on your business, but you're not actually billing for that time. So that's something we'll talk about in business basics, where you can factor that in when you are planning ahead as a freelancer. And then, of course, freelancing does not come with employee benefits. So when you're working full-time, typically you receive insurance paid by the company. This is not the case for freelancers. So you're responsible for finding and paying for your own coverage. There are a lot of affordable options out there, and a lot of new insurance companies that know there are freelancers. However, it does come out of pocket for you. And you also don't get paid for sick days. So if you are sick and you miss a day of work, you do not get paid for that. Again, these are all things that you can factor into your plan and your budget for freelancing, but it's good to be made aware of them at the beginning before you even jump in. And then, of course, finances and the business basics are really up to you. So aside from managing your freelance projects and your clients, you are also managing your taxes, your accounting, billing, licensing fees, contracts. These are all things that you'll need to learn when you begin freelancing and can kind of come with a stiff learning curve, and also things that just take up time. And you can, of course, outsource some of these services, but that will cost money as well. So these are all things just to think about right before you start freelancing, and to sort of set up some basics to make sure that you're prepared for all of these challenges and are factoring that in as you begin freelancing. So the next few slides are going to help you work through some of these challenges so that they feel less challenging. So we're going to jump into some business basics. I am a really big supporter of making sure that you feel very confident about setting up your business basics before you even accept clients. This just gives you a really strong foundation to be successful as a freelancer. So we'll talk through some common business structures and some terms that you might have heard of. We'll talk about setting your rate. That's one of the biggest questions I always get. Obviously, you need to get paid. We'll talk about contracts, super important. And then we'll talk a little bit about time management as a freelancer. Okay, so business structures. As a freelancer, there are essentially two different options for business structures. One is called a sole proprietorship, or SP, and the other is a limited liability company, which is an LLC. The majority of freelance designers, illustrators, and artists operate as a sole proprietorship. This is extremely common. It essentially just means that you're doing business under your name and you're reporting your business earnings on your personal income. You will be given a 1099 from a company and you are just reporting them to yourself. You're not paying separate business taxes. You're not setting up a different business registration. It is just you and you are filing as a sole proprietor. A limited liability company is a little bit different, where you are actually registering your business as a company. You can register your name. It could be Alicia Alex LLC. And it essentially is a hybrid of both kind of the benefits of being a corporation. So you've probably seen corporation names where it's, we'll say LLC after, and that just means that they are protected from personal liability. So if I have an LLC and I get sued, the business is getting sued, not me. And you also get certain tax write-offs that corporations might benefit from, but the downside is also that you have to pay business taxes every year. You have to pay to register your company and keep that up. And one of the main reasons that freelancers decide to become an LLC is if you find yourself working with really large corporations all the time, where there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of liability, and you don't want to be personally liable for any of it. This is more of a rare situation, or if your freelance company is growing so big and you're hiring other freelancers under you, you'll probably want to protect yourself under an LLC. These are both things to just look into a little bit further. Decide which one makes the most sense for you and where you're at in your freelance career. There's no right or wrong option. It's just up to what makes sense for you. But definitely dive in a little bit and make sure that you know which one you're going to operate as before you even start operating as a freelancer. Okay, so once you've figured out your business structure, we're going to talk about setting your rate. Because getting paid is important, and it's important to know what your rate is and what your billable hours are before you even start taking on clients, so that you have an idea of when someone comes to you with a budget, or you need to propose a rate, that you know what your rate needs to be in order to survive as a freelancer. And so there's a really simple formula for this. This is a really common formula as well. And essentially, you want to take your adjusted annual salary, and the adjusted part means that it's your target salary. So if you say, I ran the numbers and I know in order to pay my rent and to put some money in savings and pay my student debt, and also live the lifestyle I want, I know that I want to make $70,000 a year. So that's your target salary. And then you also want to include all the business expenses that you know are going to accrue by being a freelancer. So you think, I know I need subscriptions to Adobe all year. I know that I need to pay for software. I need to pay for technology. I know I have an accountant now, and so I'm going to need to pay that person. These are kind of all of your doing business expenses. You add those together, and that's your adjusted annual salary. And then you want to divide that by your billable hours per year. So this is really taking into account the US system of 40 hours a week as a typical working week, not including weekends. And so on average, there are 2,080 working hours a year. That does not take into account vacation time, sick days, government holidays, and those non-billable hours that we talked about, like marketing, reaching out to new clients. Those are all things that are not considered in those 2,080 working hours, because those are all things that you can determine for yourself. So if you are someone that wants 3 weeks vacation a year, you don't get sick all the time, so you only want 2 sick days a year, those are things that you can subtract from those 2,080 working hours to come up with your personal billing hours per year. So you take your adjusted annual salary, you divide it by your billable hours per year, and that will equal your rate per hour. And so that is a really great starting point for when you are working with clients. And so I know that could be a little bit confusing, so I'll take you through an example of what that will be. So I'm starting out freelancing and I ran my numbers and I decided that my target salary is $70,000 a year. And then I looked at what healthcare is going to cost me now that it's coming out of pocket. I know I need to set some money aside to pay for taxes. I know that I have software I need to buy this year. I know that internet is going to cost me a certain amount to run this business and that I need some admin tools. So I add up all of those expenses, and that came to about $22,000 on top of my target salary to cover my living costs. So together, my adjusted annual salary is $92,000 a year. That is what I need to make in 2021. I'm going to divide that by my personal billable hours per year. So I took that 2,080 hours and I factored in a 2-week vacation that I want to take. I factored in 2 weeks of sick time just in case. I want to take every US government holiday. And I know that since I'm new at freelancing, I'm going to have to spend some extra time looking for new clients and marketing myself. So I factored that in as well and subtracted that time from the 2,080 and came up with 1,864 actual billable hours per year. So I took that 92,000 and I divided it by 1,864 and came up with a $50 an hour starting rate. So that gives me an idea that I know that my minimum rate is $50 an hour when working with clients. And so again, having a sense of what that rate is before you even start working with clients is really important because essentially it'll help you track if you are on track. So if you are taking clients, you can say my rate is 50. You know that personally you can't fall below that in order to make that $92,000 a year. And then you can check in with yourself every few months and say, am I on track? Does my rate still make sense? Do I need to switch up my billable hours? Should I lower my salary? Are there adjustments I can make in my personal budget? And so you just basically need a starting point in order to be flexible and make those adjustments. And then once you go through a full year of freelancing, you'll have some data on how many clients you actually worked with, how tangible is this $50 an hour and these billable hours, and it gives you something to work with. So you've set your business structure, you know what your rate's going to be. The next part is protecting yourself legally. This is so important, and I cannot stress enough how important contracts are. Always, always, always have a contract. So for those that don't know, a freelance contract is essentially just a legal agreement between yourself and the client where you agree on the project you're going to complete, the work you're going to deliver, and how much you're going to get paid for it. That's kind of the nitty-gritty. You should always have one on hand to give to the client. So I always recommend as kind of your business toolkit, have a general contract where you know that you agree to all these terms in your own contract, and you can switch out some of the specifics depending on the client, but that you should always just have one to give to the client. Now, in most cases, especially if your client is a business or a corporation, they'll often have their own contract that they want you to sign. That's totally okay as long as you agree to all the terms in that contract. No need to sign both contracts. You just need a contract that is signed by both parties, and just double check that if you are signing someone else's contract, that you are reading all the terms and that you agree to everything before you sign it and that you receive a copy of it. So either way, 2 signatures, 2 copies. Now we're going to talk through some of the things that you will find that are pretty common on a contract and things that your personal contract should definitely include. So you'll want contact details for both yourself and the client. This is usually listed in the header or in the first paragraph. You want to make sure that the project scope is listed on there. So sometimes it'll say the art direction or just the general understanding of what project is you're working on. Deliverables, which are the exact files or illustrations or designs that you are delivering to the client. So if the project is 5 8x10 illustrations delivered in PNGs, that is the deliverables. And so you want to make sure that's clearly defined in your contract. And then you want to talk about pricing and rates, your payment schedule and options, deadlines and timelines. Those are important. And then ownership and copyright. This is one of the most important things to look for in a contract and make sure you feel good about. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then a kill fee, or a cancellation term. And a kill fee is essentially a fee that is paid if the project gets canceled suddenly. So let's say you've been working with the client for 6 months and you've done all this work and multiple drafts, and they decide that, it's not really working out, I need to go in a different direction. If they kill the project, a kill fee guarantees that you still get paid for those hours that you worked. And this fee is really up to you. It's something that should be discussed with the client beforehand, but it's really important to just protect those precious billable hours and make sure that you have a kill fee or cancellation terms. And then, of course, signatures. Contracts mean nothing if you both have not signed it, so make sure that there are signatures on it, and again, that you receive a copy. So I want to really emphasize that you should protect your intellectual property. So as a designer, your IP is your bread and butter. This is arguably the most important section of any contract, aside from payment terms and project scope. So remember that in the US, you automatically own the copyrights to anything you create, and you have the right to set the terms for how those get transferred to a client, if they get transferred to a client. And so oftentimes you'll see you'll see kind of like a licensing area in a contract commonly with a couple different terms. So I'm going to talk through some of the licensing terms that are really common and what to look out for, specifically if you are going to be signing someone else's contract. So this is one I used to work with a lot, called full assignment, or full assignment of rights. And this essentially means that you are handing over all of your IP to the client, and that the client has exclusive rights to your design with total freedom to reproduce, modify. It's as if you create something out of nothing, give it to them, and you no longer own it whatsoever. A lot of times, if this is the way you want to work with a client, the fees can be a lot higher for a full assignment because you are just signing over all of your copyright. So keep that in mind and look for that in the fine print, because if that's something you don't agree to, you don't want to sign off on a full assignment. A really common one is an exclusive license with freedom to modify. So this means that that particular client has an exclusive to this design, but they are able, which means they can't sell it to others, you can't sell it to others. But it means that they are able to modify it. And so they can go in, they can edit color, they can edit the size. And so this is something that you want to make sure you agree with or not. And then a limited licensing contract. This is one where you can really dictate the terms, where you say, I'm going to license this artwork to you for 2 years. And then after that, we need to revisit this contract. And for every year after that, it's an additional $150 to license this work. Oftentimes, this is if you have an existing artwork that you did not make specifically for the client, that they want to license for a particular time period. So that is one where you get to kind of dictate the specifics and the fees within that. And then personal use, you can always negotiate for personal use, which means that regardless of any of the licensing, you have the right to use this on your website and your marketing materials, talk about the fact that you worked with this client. This is really important because one of the ways you're going to gain new clients is by showing other client work. So some major companies who just want to buy out your work totally won't agree to personal use, but it's something you always want to try to negotiate with. One of my favorite contract resources is AIGA. They have a really excellent standard agreement form. And so I highly recommend looking through that. They really break down all the different licensing terms. It's great for not just designers, but illustrators or anyone else looking to freelance. And it kind of helps you piece together a contract. So highly recommend that. And then I just quickly want to talk through time management. So when you're a freelancer, time management is literally money. I know we talked about billable hours all the time. And I know that oftentimes when all of the things are up to you, the projects, the getting the clients, it can kind of feel like a whirlwind, and time management feels really overwhelming. So I think if you can get a hold of time management before you even start working on projects, or create a time management plan for yourself, it'll kind of set you up for success so that you're not dropping the balls on anything, so that you aren't feeling burnt out, it kind of will help you manage. So one of the best things you can do is make a schedule. I know I said one of the best things about freelancing is that flexibility, but setting a structure for yourself will really help you not feel overwhelmed. It'll help you stay on deadline. And that schedule can be anything. If you know that you're most productive from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then you want to work again late at night, that's great. That is a personal schedule. So just make a schedule. Don't forget to take days off. Freelance burnout is so real. And I have worked with so many freelancers who are just saying yes to everything, taking on everything. And I can tell that they're burnt out and not giving their all. So factor in days out, take those vacation days. Remember that you can take breaks the way you would when you are actually working at a company. And then write it down. If this all feels really overwhelming to you, track your hours for the first few months. See what your days look like. You'll start to see what patterns emerge, and you can kind of get a grasp of when you're most productive, when it makes sense to do the admin work, because maybe that's not something you want to do at 4 p.m. on a Friday. So really just write it down, get tangible, see what works for you. And just remember, you are in charge of your time. And so do what makes sense for you. Don't try to force a schedule that doesn't make sense just because you think that's maybe what all the other freelancers you know are doing. Just remember, you're in charge of your time. Be really smart about it. And definitely say no to projects. I know this goes against probably our instincts when we're first starting to freelance because you are worried about getting all the clients and you want to make sure that you have enough work. But I've worked with freelancers who have clearly said yes to too many projects, and then they drop the ball on my project or they ghost me. And that is not a good way to build client relationships. So I would say be really realistic with your time and the amount that you're able to take on. And don't be afraid to say no. I call it a respectable no. You could say no to this project, say you have too much going on and that you really want to take it on when you have the time and bandwidth to work on this project. And I promise you that client will come back at a later time, because if they like your work, they'll continue to reach out to you. Okay. So that really covers all of our business basics. Those are just the the fundamentals to really make sure that you feel prepared to jump into freelancing. The other thing that I think is really important, aside from business basics, is making sure that you have a good grasp on your brand. Because again, as a freelancer, you are in charge of finding clients, marketing your work to clients. And when you're just starting out, you want to make sure that your brand is in tip-top shape so that if someone is coming to you to do work, that you have a portfolio website, a really great bio and about me, and that you're utilizing social media in a way that is going to attract new clients and build up your community. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some best practices of making sure that your brand is in a great place to begin freelancing. So portfolio websites, so important. I cannot tell you how many freelancers I decided not to work with because I went to their portfolio site and it did not exist. This is the number one way that clients are going to get a sense of the work that you do, dive into your projects. It is so important to have a portfolio website and have one that is well organized and that makes sense and that is really speaking to the fact that you are open for freelance work. So if the idea of a portfolio website feels really overwhelming, I just wanted to break down some ways that can help you get started in building that if you haven't already. So you first just want to define the purpose of your portfolio website. Obviously, if you are planning to freelance, landing opportunities and showcasing your work is probably the purpose of your website. So keep that in mind as you're building it out. Organize your content. That is a no-brainer, but also if you are a really hands-on, tangible person like I am, use Post-it notes to plan out your projects. Get on the wall, organize it that way. Sometimes when we're in our computers, it can feel really overwhelming to categorize things, but use Post-it notes, get a sense of how you want to organize it before you start organizing your projects. And then look for inspiration. Look at other freelancer websites, people you admire, get a sense of how they're talking about themselves, how they're displaying their work, and bookmark those, use them as inspiration. And it's just a really great way to see what's out there and what's working for people. And then if you are going to freelance full-time or even part-time, I really recommend owning your own domain name. It just signals a level of professionalism that doesn't really come across when you have something .squarespace.com. So this is just something to consider. It's relatively inexpensive nowadays. And you just want something that is your first name and last name.com or whatever your professional name you want to go by. But I think owning your own domain name really signals to a client that you are professional, that you are doing this seriously. And I think that's really important. And then again, you want to watch CPD's portfolio website workshop. I led a really great workshop last year that takes you through the nitty gritty of all the things you need in order to actually build out the website. So that's available on our website. I highly recommend giving that a look. I'll put some of these links in the chats afterwards as well. And then a major part of your website, or just in general, is this bio and about me. It is so important that you spend some time really talking about yourself, because you really are in charge of selling your skills, selling your work. And so you want a bio or about me that says who you are, where you're located, what you do and what you make, what inspires you, talk about your unique skill sets. And then one of the things I love is when artists and designers say that they're available to freelance. That makes it a lot easier for a potential client to reach out. And so I just dropped a little example of what that could look like there. But definitely spend some time with your about me and your bio. And that's something that I talk about in the portfolio website workshop as well. And I want to talk about Instagram. It is so important for a freelance career. I cannot stress this enough. I know some of us are burnt out on social media, but Instagram is so, so important for finding clients, getting your work in front of potential clients, growing your creative community. I found probably 40 out of the 50 freelancers on Instagram, and that is the first point of contact. And then I would go to their website. So I highly recommend utilizing Instagram, connecting with people on Instagram. It's a great way to also just discover new ideas and trends and see what's happening, see what other people are doing. Again, connect with those potential employers, follow art directors, follow the people that work at the places you want to freelance, like their things, comment on them, engage with them. I promise they're noticing. And then it really does bring attention to your work, and it just enhances your brand as a freelancer. I cannot recommend it enough. And so definitely do that. I talk a little bit about that in the portfolio website workshop as well. Okay, so once you have built your brand, it is also super important to then build your creative network. One of the best ways that you are going to find new clients and to gain support in the freelance community is to build that creative network. As a freelancer, you are your own ambassador, and this is really important. So before you even begin to start freelancing, it's really important to just start cultivating that community so that when you do start freelancing, you kind of have that support around you. You have people who have eyes on your work already. And I know this can be really overwhelming. So I want to talk about a couple places you can even start to do this. So the majority of participants on this call are either current students or alumni at Art Center. So Art Center is a perfect place to just start building that creative community with your peers, with alumni, with faculty. Just cultivate that and make sure that you continue to cultivate that after you graduate. These are all excellent connections and networks to foster as you continue, especially in your freelance career. Social media, I know that I just mentioned Instagram, really important place to start finding those relationships, to show off kind of your own work and your professionalism in the community. I think I can't stress it enough how important social media is. Twitter too, don't sleep on Twitter. Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all really important. So definitely social media, an easy virtual space to build community. And then I know events are maybe not a thing right now, but events in general one day again, and then digital conferences. There are so many art and design based conferences or chats happening, and a lot of them come with Slack channels associated with them where you can network with other creatives. That's a really great just virtual space to connect with other people, build that community. And collaborations. This is something that I feel is so important, and not a lot of people do this, but one of the best ways that you can build community is just asking if people want to collaborate. I know that in an art school environment, that feels really natural sometimes with our peers, but you can reach outside of the Art Center community, collaborate with people that you admire, work on those things. It's a great way to expose the work you're doing to other people's communities and vice versa. So definitely Art Center, social media, digital conferences, events, collaborations, these are all really great, easy places to start. So now that you know where to start building that creative community, I'm going to give you a few tips on how to network within them and to really cultivate them. So of course, you want to cultivate those online relationships. So it's great if you're striking up conversation, commenting on social profiles, really being prolific in your own social profiles. But of course, it's not enough to just comment back and forth and like things. You want to be able to transform those relationships into something tangible. So if you're having a really great conversation with someone, ask them to have a Zoom coffee chat, or when it's safe again to have a in real life coffee. These are just ways that you can kind of transform just that online relationship into something that is longer lasting. And then again, give and take. So similarly to how if you were to go on a first date and the person on the date would say, "Hi, it's nice to meet you. Do you want to get married?" That is kind of a little too abrupt. You want to get to know the person, you want to build a relationship with the person, and then maybe down the line you ask if they want to get married. So similarly, when you are meeting new people, forming new relationships, you don't want to start off too hot and ask for things right off the bat. So you want to build genuine relationships, get to know them, and then that way there's sort of this give and take of information and resources, and it feels more genuine, and will build a long-lasting relationship that will benefit you. And then keep your eyes open for opportunities. So anywhere you are, if you keep your eyes and ears open to opportunity, it's really your job to do that as a freelancer and to capitalize on those opportunities. So it could be at a friend's dinner party or at one of the digital conferences or just overheard in a conversation at Art Center. If you hear something about an opportunity, you just never know when something will lead to something or when something will change your career. And so that's why having that about me or a really great understanding of the type of work you do and what type of freelancer you are kind of in your back pocket to be able to say that to someone in one of those circumstances will be really helpful to you as a freelancer. And then again, just in general, you want to nurture your connections, show support for your community, show up to events or digital events, follow and support fellow creatives, be that champion, and you'll get that support back. You also want to make sure that you're keeping up those relationships. So if you are forming relationships, check in every so often, send a quick email, see how they're doing, send a holiday card. Those really go a long way in order to continue those connections and make sure there's something deeper. And then if an opportunity does come up, those people will think of you for it and vice versa. So just a few ways to really hone in on that creative community because it's going to set you up in a really great place to be able to find work as a freelancer and to find support from other freelancers. So something I highly, highly recommend. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, and so we're coming to an end. I just want to let you know that next week in the Basics of Freelancing Part 2, we're going to dive into, now that you kind of have all of your foundation pieces, we're going to focus on how you even find clients, how you go about pitching your work, getting paid, so negotiating that rate that we talked about, managing those client relationships, and then how you kind of stay inspired as a freelancer. So with that, I know that was a lot of information, but I will open it up to questions and I will stop the recording and then I will answer all of your questions.